dear friends, welcome in our new daoland healthcare video. This is a video specifically about Chinese yoga, yoga's history and so on. In the background you will be able to look at one of our yoga classes and you can just follow the classes. You don't really need much words for that, to just be part of that class and to do these exercises for your health. When you want to participate on classes on a regular basis and actually do the things that yoga is actually good for, then of course I would advise you to sign up for our Patreon program, become a sponsor. For just a few tens of euros or dollars, you can partake in about 7 classes a week, and there are some monthly classes and other things that you can find access to. Just talk with me, I will explain to you all the details, and we get to that point. Everything there is very personal. We are in small groups, so don't worry. Everything is going to be fine. You can get all your questions answered. And for this, we have to ask ourselves a few questions. Look, this is what researchers hold on to, namely that China and India share a 5,000 years old relationship, a social cultural civilization that influenced each other through many different kind of things. And they have indeed both a very long history, and many of the roots of that history are not yet figured out completely. But the exchange between the two cultures actually only started during the Han and a little bit before the Han, when Buddhism started trickling into China in the form of Tantrism. Indian culture and the Chinese culture, they were separated by the jungles of Southeast Asia, and these are not easy to travel to. There were all kind of tribes. They were not always very happy with each other, so passing these tribes was also not very easy. The other solution was to go all the way around the Tibetan Plateau, because the Tibetan Plateau people, they were very wild and destructive, and they even one time created a kingdom which conquered north of India and most part of China before they became Buddhists. So no, there was not that much exchange. It is mainly through the interaction between the Tibetan Plateau and India and Tibetan Plateau and China that at a certain point more and more information trickled over from the one to the other. Both cultures, of course, did have a lot of influence on other countries around them and on the world as a whole. For instance, the invention of the number 0. There is the invention of gunpowder, of rockets, of ballooning, of printing press, etc. But also that of yoga, and that is our topic today. Most people in the world nowadays think that yoga is a typical Indian thing. But people do not realize that yoga is already present in China from about the 3rd, 4th, 6th century AD. So that is indeed a very long history. The history of yoga in China is therefore very long. But the irony is that when I discuss this in China, many Chinese Buddhist, Daoists, yogis, who are all following Indian and American forms of yoga, they denied that. They said, but yoga is only short time now in China, because there was a marketing tool for the Indian and the American culture. Westernization included the process of going to yoga class. I have discussed the introduction of yoga in China already in another video. We talked about the Yoga Pradipika there, and I will try to figure out if I can put it down below in the commentaries. History shows that the first mentionings of yoga from India was from the late Han Dynasty, so between 202 BC and 220 AD. Nowadays, there's a whole new wave of yoga in China, and that is more tuned into an aesthetic culture, and we go discuss a few pointers about that later on in this video. Modern yoga culture has been split off a little bit in two parts: the militarized parts like Iyengar and Ashtanga, which are mostly practiced by men. And then there is, of course, the more feminine yogas, including yin yoga and so on, which are mostly practiced by women, where the aesthetic value of practicing yoga and the beauty that it provides for your body is the most important part. Sure, many people are also mystified by the spiritual culture of yoga, but the representation of spiritual culture of yoga, both in the West and in Asia, in China included, is based on Western spirituality and energy work and stuff like this, and it doesn't relate very well to the past. You might find it interesting, though, as a tidbit, that the Chinese state television, already in 1985 on CCTV, started a weekly yoga program so that people could get to understand more about yoga. And what you have seen in modern China is that the yoga culture more or less pushed aside a large part of the Tai Chi Chuan and the qigong culture that was budding in that same time. Classical dance, modern Western classical dance, has also pushed this aside as the mainstay of trying to keep healthy in China. Let's go a little bit into the history of yoga. The Hindus, they say that Shiva and his wife are the inventors of yoga. Shiva was teaching his wife Parvati yoga, but they are both known as the creators of yoga. Shiva made, of course, Parvati there with his student, and that also established the relationship between men and women in the family as such. Yoga came to China with the Buddhists, and it was mostly brought there as a meditation practice. Patanjali, he described yoga as meditation, and Buddhists, they called it dhyani, which is basically the same word as yoga. If we dive a little bit deeper into the history of yoga, then you see that in the Indus Valley civilization, there were the first depictions of yoga in the form of seals, and they were related to the fire ritual. The fire ritual was the sacrifice of fire, and I will get back to that in another time, in another video, because I think that is very interesting to see and how that influenced, of course, Buddhism as a whole. It came together with an ascetic lifestyle, with self-sacrifice, and with a form of long postural concentrations to get the sacrifice fixed. Yoga was mentioned in the Rig Veda, but also in the Mahabharata and many other texts. In all cases, it refers to the concepts of union and joining, and this is very similar to the Tai concept in Daoism, which definitely is a sort of parallel development. We see that yoga follows a two-step form of alchemy, where the first step is that one of joining of mind and body, and the second step is of mind and a sense of self. In Taoist alchemy, we have a four-step where we talk about the flowering of Jing, then the flowering of the Qi, and the flowering of the Shen, and returning to unity, and the joining with, of course, the Tao. Like in Buddhism and Taoism, also in yoga, it is suggested that suffering triggers the search for unity. I remember my Taoist friends always saying that nobody seeks Tao without having their own portion of suffering, and that is the same for yoga. The Bhagavad Gita suggests that yoga rides on suffering and can be accomplished by disciplined diet and relaxed activity, limited sleep, and optimized wakefulness. With the diet thing, they mean similar things like what we do in our food medicine diet module, where you learn to limit your food by paying proper attention to what food actually does to you. That is the Taoist way. How the dietary discipline is exactly in the yoga is not really clear to me, except that it is similar in the fact that you should eat less and definitely not try to focus on modern science in that sense, but just should always be a little bit hungry. When we talk about the performance of yoga, it should not be hard work. It should be a relaxed activity, because you should gradually open up your body and create a better starting point for your day. In chapter 4 of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that the yogi is better than the ascetic. So asceticism is good, but to a limited degree. He says also that he is better than the scholar. So it is not enough to just have a lot of knowledge. It also should be applied to real practice, like what we do in the IOC Daoland bachelor program and master program, where we balance the scholarship with 50% practice. So 50% scholarship, 50% practice, because without practice, how can you verify your theoretical model? Patanjali, the famous first writer about yoga, he suggests that yoga is a form of achieving perfection. And we can debate about, of course, about the differences between yogic perfection and Taoist perfection, because we talk about perfection all the time when we talk about the Qi and Tao at the same time also. You see that in modern yoga very often is militarized, the breath is militarized, everything is militarized, and everything has been made into a sort of aesthetic practice instead of actually functional yogic practice. And that is a really big pity, and it is actually in Tai Chi Chuan, Kung Fu is the same. Because in Taoism, perfection always has been associated with modesty, with averageness and appropriateness. This is the same for the Yoga Sutras. The achievement is seen as part of the appropriateness. In the Tang Dynasty, that is from 420 to 489 AD, it was considered muscle and bone strengthening practice, the I Ching Ching, which is still practiced in a form in Shaolin, but it is heavily redacted. Also, it was called the Chen Chu massage method, and it links also a little bit to the Liu self massage that we are offering in our program, where you can see that qigong, yogic practice, and so on, they are mingled a little bit. You see that it has developed further and further over time. Qigong, then, in that sense, is really also rooted in some aspect of yoga. Of course, Qigong being a new invention from the 20th century, it clearly also relates to everything that has been before. In the Song Dynasty, it became somewhat more gloriously called the Brahman Daoyi method. And when we look at our breath yoga, you see that there are links to this breath yoga method from the Brahman Daoyin. If you go look at modern history, you can see that nowadays Chinese people, they practice yoga a lot. It is very popular, mostly with women. And they practice yoga for three main reasons. They are called Jiankang, which is general health, and Jianfei, that is to lose weight, and for Jian Yanli, that is to relax your tensions, which in the West is called stress. I have an article somewhere where I discuss how the concept of stress and that of Jian Yanli is not the same. In Chinese medicine, concepts like stress, they are non-existent. But what they do say is that the development of, what we could call stress is very important, because it has to be harnessed. When the young rises, your stress levels also rise. And as a result of that, you have to learn to manage your body in a proper way to carry the stress, to be able to achieve better in life. So in Chinese medicine, it's not the idea to reduce your high blood pressure as a result of stress, but the idea is to improve the quality of your body so that you do not develop high blood pressure, while in the meantime increasing the pressure on your body. The pressure on your body then is seen as vitality. That is just to make clear how the differences in health and body concept from Chinese medicine and Western medicine is relevant. You can't just apply Chinese medicine formulas because of wrong translation of Western techniques. You will have some effect, but the goals in Western medicine and Chinese medicine are completely different. Yoga has had a great effect on the commercial spiritual market or health market, and has become an amazing competition for Daoist Tai Chi Chuan and Kung Fu, Qigong, and so forth. These are mainly because yogic practices are very willing to pamper people with nice feelings and beautiful things and stuff like this. And for a rising and developing middle class in China, yoga gave the impression of being associated with something exotic that also promises to give a sense of well-being. It's really what it really promises in all the classes. So yoga is also associated with increasing of wealth, just like coffee at Starbucks, which could be paid with a credit card. It was also this observation that stimulated Sifu Yao Xuande to give us the assignment, to give me especially that assignment, to develop the Wudang program into a system that can be used in city life from day to day in 1 hour classes sessions like what we do in the Daoland program. Right? At the time, none or maybe few of the disciples of my teacher had enough experience with city life to be able to do that. And of course, I was already working for 20 years as a teacher and instructor and Chinese medicine practitioner, and I had a wide field of experience in the programs as Zhang Sanfen proposed it. So for me, with my PhD program, it was easier to develop that kind of skills. And my mentor in China, in the West, at the university, also was very happy with that because it provided a means, a model to also introduce in countries like Africa or other regions of the world where healthcare has been developed poorly, and there are a lot of people who have not been able to drag themselves out of poverty. But the truth must be said, although I got this assignment to do this, I could never have done that without the support and the help of all my brothers and my sister, because, there were a lot of holes in my understanding of Wudang culture, and they have provided me with enough skills and understandings that I could fill them in and find the right resources to better explain things. In the current Daoland program, there are two forms of yoga that can clearly be called yoga. And actually, the breath yoga is more of a Daoyin, but we refer to that as a yoga for the simple reason that it looks most like yoga, what people do in the West, even though it is much more disciplined into a fixed form, with the first part in developing your breath and slowing down your breathing, and the second part into developing your preparation for immortality. The second form of yoga, what we call the play yoga, is there to help you in a relaxed way to open up your body. The practices that we do here are like that, and the class is every week with a little bit of different exercises, and depending also sometimes on the medical or the psychological or whatever kind of questions people have about their own body, to make sure that they get to the right place with themselves and gradually open up and grow and flourish and be ready to do more complicated things. I have been doing yoga, Indian American yoga, before I went to China, and just like I let go of the Yang and the Chen and the Wu styles of Tai Chi Chuan because of it missing the alchemical aspects, I have also let go of all these kind of forms of yoga because the simple reason that it doesn't comply with the actual intentions of yoga. And to be true to yourself when you try to live a yogic lifestyle, it is important to recognize that and to get to that kind of inner freedom, to be able to, how do you say, achieve at a certain point something in a sense of staying young for a long time, having your vitality, being agile in your movements, and so forth and so forth. Of course, yoga itself is never going to be enough to accomplish this, because yoga is relatively static compared to things like Tai Chi Chuan and some forms of qigong also. So in that sense, yoga has its limits. And I must say that everybody who has been doing yoga is very properly prepared for something like Tai Chi Chuan, because the body is more open and the person has become more sensitized to what all might go on in their body when they have done the yoga, of course, in a relaxed way. If they have done it in the bodybuild way, as is very popular in the 20th century, then of course they're just as insensitive as any other people who goes to the gym. And not to be negative about that, but still, the gym work is far from yogic accomplishment, because it is about the militarizing of the body as a slave of the mind, and in yoga we seek union. So that is completely different from that. In Tai Chi Chuan is exactly the same. It's the same like when you seek a bodhisattva path in Buddhism, which I have also been doing before I became a Daoist. It is the same as seeking yourself to become a Xian, because you can't be a Xian, an immortal or a sage or something like this without having the right moral choices. And you see that in that sense, the path of yoga and the path of Daoist and all the different kind of practices and arts that belong to that, they are very similar. And in that sense, the Daoland program represents that idea, and it tries to put it into a mainstream practice that people can follow and gradually come more intensely involved with the management of their health and enter on this alchemical path, which is hidden underneath all this practice, although I must remind you that the goals are not the same. As a last, somewhat funny story, I wanted to add one thing that happened to me. There was a world conference on yoga in Hong Kong, sorry, some time ago. I don't even remember which year it was. So I signed up for that, and then I got a call back from Hong Kong, and they said, like, look, we cannot have you in here because there is no such thing as Chinese yoga. Let alone a Daoist yoga, and these people were clearly not aware of their history because they were so much indoctrinated by the modern wave of yogic comfort practice. So there you go. It is a very important part of the modern time to not recognize the past, and this is what we also try to overcome with the Daoland program. So this is it for this video. I hope you really enjoyed it. As I said before, I was asked many times to say more about the history of yoga in China. This is then by this accomplished, and I hope of course that you sign up for the classes because they are a lot of fun, and they are definitely a strong educational impulse in case you do any form of Indian yoga or other kind of yoga, American yoga, if you want to deepen your practice. When you are trying to become a Taoist nowadays, you can't do without these yogic practices also, not alone because now Taoist monks are learning Iyengar and Ashtanga yoga, but also because yoga has always been part of their practice, and they have not understood that until the last, say, 10-15 years when I started introducing yoga, and they were always like, how come you can do yoga? And this is so very complicated and difficult. But they all followed classes with me to learn some basics of yoga. Also at the same time, while when I was going into the mountains, I was all the time meeting Taoists who were practicing yoga as part of their wake-up routines or going to sleep routines. I very much like you, of course, to sign up. If you do not sign up, no problem. Share this with people who you know who like yoga, but definitely also make sure that you, if you have the space, sponsor this program so they can keep on making videos like this, because we try to offer them for free, and it is always helpful if somebody helps you out with financing these things, and I don't have to finance them all by myself all the time. Thank you very much anyway for your attention. I will also make this video for members so that they can follow this as a class in general, so that it's without all this speech, so that they have a double portion this coming week. Well, that is basically everything that I had to say for today. I really enjoyed making this because it also clarifies parts of Taoist practice as a whole, and how I cannot emphasize enough how much yoga also practice also helped me in my alchemical practice, even though I do not follow necessarily the yogic alchemical path. Of course, I'm a Taoist, and as such, I think the Taoist alchemy is a very helpful broadening of your understanding of life as a whole, for which your health definitely will be grateful. One last point about the yogic exercise itself. This is the basic level, you can say, of practice, very average, to make sure that everybody can participate and can enjoy this, to help you strengthen your body, and of course to help you create more flex in your muscles and your tendons, but also to strengthen your bones, blood circulation, and so on and so on. Every time the classes depend on the participation level of the students and their input also at the same time. This kind of play yoga is very democratic, you can say, while the breath yoga is very fixed because it's like a formulatic practice to bring you to a particular kind of thing. That is, of course, as a yogic practitioner or as an alchemist, a very important part. Further, I like to point out that yoga is in itself and in the form of the practice of asanas. It's a vipassana as a preparation for meditation. So when yoga is practiced in a proper way, it will eventually lead you to a very deep meditation. So that means that a yogic session should be followed up with meditation for like 2, 3, 4 hours or something like this. What I would advise against is combining yoga with music or with mantra or something like this, because this is a completely different kind of spiritual tradition and also different kind of practice. Although it feels all very nice, yoga is not there to help you comforting you, but is there to help you achieve a better result in being alive, and therefore it should challenge you, and it should definitely not be militarized by putting you into the framework of music or song or a particular kind of spiritual tradition per se. Yoga as a practice is non religiously denominated. It is just a very nice thing to practice. That's about it. I look forward to hear from you and to share a lot of time with you in class.